So here we start chapter 3, week 3 of our course, having to do with question of freedom. It may be more proper to call it the problem of freedom, and that might be good. I mean, as we see, the different subject matters that we're talking about, knowledge, mind, and now freedom, can all be really thought of as problems, that is, conceptual problems. How is it, for instance, that I can know anything? Given my certain ideas about my perceptions and their relations to what I take to be an external world, how can I ever be sure that I know anything? Problem of mind, given that it seems to me that I have an experience of myself as a mind, or an experience of my own thoughts, or an experience of my mental life, how does that fit in with my notion that the world really consists of physical things, or a physical universe that can be described by science? Excuse me. And here the problem of freedom, and we can see that there is a problem. There's not a problem in people being free. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. Problem of freedom is not in philosophy, this sort of philosophy, metaphysics, basically. The problem of freedom is not how to make people more free, or the fact that in many places in the world, perhaps even in our own country, people are not free. We're not talking about political freedom here. That's more like liberty. What we're talking about here is the very possibility, given other things that we think we know about the universe, the very possibility of acting freely. That is freedom. And here we're really not talking about political freedom. We're talking about freedom of the will. That is, the more basic question of whether a free act, a freely chosen act, is possible at all, given, again, other considerations, that is, other things that we think we know about the universe. And that leads us really to our terminological task here in talking about this, is that we all sort of know what freedom means, but what about determinism, compatibilism, and incompatibilism? Those are new words for us, new concepts. Well, the most important concept there is determinism. And compatibilism and incompatibilism really have to do with, once we understand what determinism is, and then we can certainly understand those easier things. Let me quote you from page 83, Blackburn's very succinct definition of determinism. He says on page 83, determinism is the idea that, quote, every event is the upshot of antecedent causes. Every event is the upshot, the result of antecedent, previous, coming before causes. And that seems to be a fundamental principle of our understanding of the world. That is, that every event, everything that happens as a result of previous causes. That is, that every event in the world, everything that happens because it was caused by something else. That is, nothing just happens. Things appear to just happen, but when they appear to just happen, we sort of assume that we simply don't understand what caused them. So everything that happens because it's caused by something else, and those causes determine what happens. That is, they not only determine that something happens, they determine what happens. And that seems to be a fundamental idea we have about the universe. I mean, that is, if things just happened, then we would live in a universe that maybe didn't really make sense to us. Okay, so then the question of compatibilism and incompatibilism, and really what we're talking about there is the compatibilism between determinism, the idea that every event that happens as the upshot of antecedent causes, whether that is compatible with our notion of freedom, that is, a free act, our own freedom, that is, that we actually have free choices, and that the things that we do, we chose to do, we could have done otherwise, but we didn't. So the question is really of compatibilism or incompatibilism is whether determinism is compatible or not compatible with freedom of the will. That is, can we say that we live in a world where every event is the upshot of antecedent causes, and that we are able to make free choices, that we actually choose what we want to do, what we want to believe, and that we can consider ourselves free beings? We can see that determinism could be viewed as a threat to the idea of freedom of the will. And if one thinks that it can't both be true, that we have freedom of the will and that every event, including our own actions, of course, is the upshot of antecedent causes, then we are incompatibilists or hard determinists. And that's the idea that everything that happens, including our own actions, is the result of previous causes. And so that nothing that we do really could have been otherwise. That is, we, like every other object or being in the universe, is determined in our trajectories, let's say, by antecedent causes, previous causes. So it may, in fact, appear to me that I chose to make this video just what I did. That is, I could have done otherwise. Really, my action of turning on the computer, starting to talk about this chapter, was really determined, like everything else in the world, every other event in the world, by previous causes. If I were to claim that I was actually free in my choice, I would have to perhaps say that my choice, although it caused certain things to happen in the world, my choice to talk about this issue now into a computer, that it actually, my choice caused these events to be happening as they're happening now, but I would have to say that the choice itself was uncaused. The choice was a spontaneous thing, that the choice itself disobeys the rule that every event is the upshot of antecedent causes. I would have to claim that my choice, and every free choice, so-called free choice that I make, is somehow an exception to the rule, that everything in the world, you could say, is the upshot of antecedent causes, except when a human being or other free conscious being engages in an act of will. We could certainly defend that sort of position, but we can see the problem. We're making an exception for our so-called free actions. They themselves are not caused by anything else. They cause things, and that's a matter of mind-body interaction, which goes back to the second chapter, but we'll put that aside. They cause things, our choices, but they are themselves uncaused, and that would seem to be paradoxical or strange, or how do you account for that? Right? So like any other problem in philosophy, we again, the important thing is or the most important thing, not the only important thing, but I'll say it again, the most important thing is to understand the problem, and to understand the problem is to understand how it arises. And the so-called problem of freedom, or the problem of freedom of the will, arises because of these two notions we have, which may or may not be compatible. On the one hand, the idea of determinism, that every event is the upshot of antecedent causes coming before it, and that our own acts of will, though, are not determined by antecedent causes. So we'll look into both of the arguments, both the compatibilist and the incompatibilist, and we can see that there's a lot at stake here. Of course, some people would say that, as Blackburn himself says on page 82, consciousness of freedom seems to be closely allied to any kind of consciousness at all. So the notion of ourselves, our awareness of ourselves, or our thinking of ourselves as free beings, cuts very close to just being a conscious being at all. So it would be something that would be very difficult to give up, wouldn't it? The notion that we are actually free, that we exercise freedom of the will. But there are serious problems with trying to make that sort of fit in with these other things that we think that we think are true about the world.